Evaluation question 3, what have I learned from my audience feedback? In order to gauge how my audience felt about my piece, I conducted a lot of research into their response. I did 2 survey monkeys in which I asked about my trailer and the developing stages and the initial plot pieces I was thinking of using for it. After that, I then used focus groups in the classes to my target audience to see how they could help me choose what I should use on my front cover and my poster, to help with the image selection and the font choices, because I wanted to be able to appeal to them in the way most possible. And so I ensured by sending out to people my age, my peers, they would get to the appropriate target audience. I found that what within my product appealed to them was, from their responses, I found that they agreed unanimously that some of the certain scenes in the trailer seemed to be most appealing and suitable for the genre. Scenes such as the jump scene at the end, in which we see the main villain jump towards the screen with a loud bang after the static sound and the various jump cuts around. They agreed that was a good way to end and made your heart race and suited the genre. They also agreed that the slow pan up the villain earlier on, in which jump cuts were used once again, was also scary when paired with the heartbeat sound at the back, created a lot of tension and build up to meeting the character for the first time. Another thing they agreed on was the red effect, which was something I added near to the end. I wanted to add a unique point within my trailer to help with the genre, to make it stand out more. So I thought that the red effect would then link with the other, as they heavily involve the colour red. And I felt that the red then could almost feel like there's a dynamic change in the storyline and how it's viewed. Like, instead of viewing with rose-tinted glasses, it's instead bloody and connotes danger. And they agreed that the red effect was something that definitely helped the horror genre and helped it link to the others. Furthermore, when asked about my front cover in the focus group, I had some problems with trying to decide what symbol I wanted to show in that and in the poster. So when showing them the different symbols I could use, it was agreed that heartbeat was something that they liked, because that actually linked to the genre, but also was an understandable symbol that linked to the horror genre and with tension, but that could also kind of didn't give too much away, but that was then more relevant than the cross or the hand. An important part for any horror film trailer is obviously pace. And pace was something that I knew that had to be done well. And they agreed that the pace was appropriate for the genre and that the music eventually used helped that, with the use of font as well linking back to the other products. An important way to appeal to my audience was that I used conventions so that they understood that it was meant to be for that genre, because the genre is based on shared conventions, as Chandler said. And so they said that the pace was an important part of the horror film trailer, as I knew. So to hear from them that there was a good pace set out with enough build-up and good tension used with the music and the heartbeat as well, that was an important part of creating a decent horror film. And then paired with the jumpy scenes used, I had to be sure that there was enough horror content in order to appeal to the people that enjoyed that genre. So after it took a while in order for there to be enough, and using the montage technique, I had to ensure that there was enough there and that they were paired well to create the feeling of like tension and build up and adrenaline to get that response from the target audience that I wanted. And they agreed that there were enough jumpy scenes in the end, because that's another important part of a horror film. The way that you distinguish it from a comedy or a romantic film, scenes like that and the way they're edited is only really seen in these sort of fast-paced horror film and sort of ones where you're trying to scare your audience and get their heart pumping. But there was also the fact that I had to follow the text throughout, and the text was something they agreed then they liked again. The text took a while and I changed it a lot, but red text linked with the other ones, which was again a thing that my audience pointed out to me to ensure the conventions followed. But And the picture used for The Little White Lies had to fit the conventions of the magazine. And though the magazine itself aims to be different, I still had to create it in that image. It had to be noticeably Little White Lies. And often the audience hadn't really heard of the magazine before. But when you show it together, they could tell that it linked with the genre, the photo editing linked with it, the use of the text in the way that they do. It all linked with that same genre used. You could actually tell that it was meant to be Little White Lies. But in order to appeal to them still, it couldn't always be the same as other horror films. As Neil said, difference is essential. So I had to push the conventions as well. So within doing this, I wanted to give mine a unique selling point by using the red in the filming again. It's not seen very often that they're filmed in sort of like monochrome sort of colours. That seems to be quite an old associated thing. They're using now much more high definition, but security cameras or handheld cameras with the deliberate glitching of the camera to create it looks more like a personal feel, or that somebody's filming it with their phone or something. And then the use of the red really highlighted it, that there was a change, and the fact that it was meant to be a blackout shows when it's got dark, but also that there's like something wrong, something's distorted, that it's intentionally changed. And the red creates like a feel of danger and of warning and of, you know, the kind of blood associated with it. But in order to appeal to them continuously, I had to use other techniques which they said that they liked, because I knew what my audience was, like kind of teenagers and 15 up, and know that the audience that tend to like horror films tend to like darker things and rebel things. So I had to make sure I appealed to the young kind of audience that probably watch a lot of horror films, and then, you know, there's a lot of generic plots, so I wanted to make sure there were certain things that would draw the audience in. So in order to do that, I used certain things such as the mise-en-scène. So the kind of setting was important. The fact that it was in a homely house, it just looked like anybody's house it could have been. That kind of creates a more sort of personally identifiable situation for the people watching. It just looks like any old family home. So they can sort of easily imagine themselves there than some place that they would never go. It's much easier to put yourself in that position. And then when something horrendous sort of happens there, it creates a more emotional response in the audience. So the setting was quite an important thing. In order to ensure that there was much more personal identity with it, the age of the characters was quite important as well. Where I was sort of going for like a teenage sort of audience, the stars were also teenagers, so again that makes them more relatable. That the fact that this is happening to them makes it kind of hit home harder because it could happen to anybody. You know, they're just like you. I used also other techniques such as the strong female leads. It's something that's not often explored really. You know, generally it's like in horror films it's expected that there's like a strong male lead, when in fact my film changes that. It's much more predominantly female with 3 female characters and only 1 male, and it seems that the male one is represented as more scared. So this kind of like creates kind of like female empowerment. It's more likely to appeal to a female side, whilst again putting another take on the genre that will interest the audience as well. In order to make sure I also appeal to them, I use things such as enigmas within the trailer. So the title itself being a question, and the use of title cards in which they would directly address the viewer, such as saying, "What would you do?" So again, that creates another personal feel for the person and another emotional feel in which they try to answer. But then enigmas are also important in any trailer because you can't give away the entire film, or there would be no point in them going to see it. So you had to kind of create a do they or don't they get out, or, you know, things that would make the viewer want to ask questions. Like, you know, who is there and what do they do? And so it gives them a reason to watch it. It can link to Maslow's hierarchy of needs as well, almost in a sense of safety. Like, it doesn't provide safety, but it provides a feeling of safety. because when you watch these people going through that, you sit and you realise that you're safe at home, and it kind of gives a feeling of security that's not happening to you, that they're going through something much worse. So it can make the audience themselves feel much safer in where they are and what they're doing. Again, with the audience, with the main characters being women, again, it kind of links to Lara Mulvey's male gaze in the genre and the audience and the way they see it, the fact that it's expected that these films are directed by men and they're made to watch through a man's eyes, so it's meant to sexualise the women. And yet in this, it's kind of, again, linked to empowerment. They're not there to be viewed like that. And there's also, again, with the direct mode address, to create an audience response with the eyes. In the poster and the front cover, the eyes are obviously quite an important thing, but they're kind of blacked out, or they've got something, and eyes are a very personal thing. They're creating that emotive connection, but the eyes are blacked out, so it's almost like, again, it creates something inhuman that's looking at you, and this linking to the audience again is going to create a more emotive response. So that's how I attempted to appeal to my audience. There are obviously things that I could have done better, such as use of cultural diversities and such, but I could only really get hold of a limited number of actors. Though I did attempt to get into some more kind of minority groups with the homosexual relationship that's viewed in there, but again, I could have done better by using a more diverse range of actors or of ages or things like that to kind of appeal to a wider audience, but I could only really use the certain people I had on hand.